All right, welcome everyone. We're so glad you're here. This is the orientation for the Grants to States Conference and also just an orientation to the Grants to States program. We've got a lot of new folks that have never been in person to one of our conferences. And for those who are attending virtually, you're still going to hear a lot of the same stuff, and a lot of it involves acronyms. So we thought one important thing we want to do today is just make sure that you have some introduction to that, among other things, and that you have an introduction to our team. I'm going to let each one of us introduce themselves. We'll go left to right in the picture order here. So Dennis, if you would get us started.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dennis Nangle. I am, as Terry mentioned, a part of the Grants to States team. I'm a senior program officer. I oversee 20 states. I won't go through the entire list, but hopefully if you're one of my states, you know who I am at this point. And I've been at IMLS for over 5 years now.
Thanks. And Madison.
Hi, everybody. My name is Madison Bowles. I am also a senior program officer with the Grants to States program. I have 19 states in my portfolio, and I see some familiar names and some folks I may be meeting for the first time. So welcome, everybody. I've been in IMLS for about 7.5 years now.
And I am the middle picture, Terry DeVoe. I am the Associate Deputy Director for Grants to States. Used to be a program officer, and I'm currently transitioning out of interim program officer role while we had a vacancy, but we've got that vacancy filled. You're going to meet Cindy in just a moment. So she and I are kind of co-sharing a portfolio for the moment. I am so glad you're here, and I'm looking forward to meeting some of you at the conference next week. And then Laura.
Hi, welcome everybody. I'm Laura McKenzie. I'm the program specialist with Grants to States. I've been with IMLS for about 5 years as well. And I kind of work across the states and do a lot of records management. And I also look forward to meeting everyone either virtually or in person next week. Thank you.
All right. And we just got a new team member last week. We're so excited to welcome her from your side of the fold in the States over to ours. Cindy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cindy Boyden. I've been with IMLS for 8 days, and I come to you from the State Library of Ohio. I'm super excited to see everybody virtually and in person next week.
This is a great team of very approachable people. So if you get nothing else out of this webinar, please know that you can contact us at any time. But today, what we're going to do is just a little bit of intro so that by the time you get to the conference next week, some of the concepts around our systems and our acronyms, the requirements and resources that we might be slinging around are a little more familiar to you at the outset. We do have some questions that we've built into this presentation just as a way of helping you check your knowledge and as a learning mode, we hope a fun way of learning. So those will be coming up. And we do have a companion handout for this presentation on the website. It's only a few pages compared to the entire deck. We will also get the deck up on the website following the presentation. But maybe one of my colleagues can stick that handout link in the chat if it's not already there. And then also just to mention, we're at the conference itself. If you are coming in person, we have a 15-minute slot before we get started with any of the formal program at 8:45, where if you just want to get into one of the breakout rooms and see us physically, how tall we are, you might be surprised. It's always fun to meet people in person for the first time. We would love to see you there, and that invitation is extended to everyone, whether you're new to the conference or not. So that's a 15-minute opportunity to meet all of us. And then we also have something we tend to call program officer office hours. And those will be at the end of the first day in 15-minute increments and in the beginning of the second day in 15-minute increments. And you can have a dedicated slot to meet with your dedicated program officer. And if you don't know who your program officer is, just type it into the chat and we'll direct you to the right place. Make sure you add your state because that's our way of deciding who goes where. But we're going to get started now with this presentation, and I am going to turn it over to Laura.
Thank you, Terry. So here are some acronyms and vocabulary that are a part of our program, starting with the Museum and Library Services Act, MLSA, and this is the broader IMLS statute that encompasses LSTA, which is also known as the Library and Services Technology Act. LSTA, as currently amended, is a subchapter of the authorizing legislation for IMLS. In 1996, Congress shifted the Library Services and Construction Act to the Library Services and Technology Act, LSTA, as a subchapter 2 of the Museum and Library Services Act. This ended federal funding for library construction and replaced it with a focus on new information technologies. So LSTA encompasses IMLS discretionary programs, and it implements a population-based formula for the states. The Grants to States program, sometimes referred to as G2S, is the largest source of federal funding support for library services in the US. State Library Administrative Agencies, or SLAAs, are official agencies charged by law with the extension and development of library services. The LSTA regulations require each SLAA to submit a 5-year plan that details library service goals. And SLAAs must also conduct a 5-year evaluation of service goals based on that plan. The chief officers of state library agencies, or COSLA, is an independent organization representing state and territorial agencies designed as the SLAA. And COSLA serves as a mechanism to help address challenges faced by the heads of the state agencies, which are responsible for statewide library development. And we have the CARES Act that was passed on March 27th, 2020 as an economic stimulus to assist American workers, families, small businesses during the pandemic. IMLS received $50 million to focus on digital inclusion and technical capacity building. ARPA is the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 and represents the second economic stimulus for pandemic response that includes the support of museum and library services. And lastly, COP, that's the Community of Practice. This is new for 2022. And it's an IMLS forum for evaluators working on the Grants to States 2018 to 2022 5-year evaluations. And this also offered opportunities for peer-to-peer engagement, access to documentation, and information about virtual meetings throughout the assessment period. Next slide, please. So here we go with more terms here. And these are really related to your grant award document. The eGMS is our electronic grants management system. And the federal government requires a business, in this case, the SLAA, to have a unique identity, ID, or UEI through the Federal System for Award Management, SAM.gov. The federal government stopped using DUNS to uniquely identify entities registered in the System for Award Management on April of this past year. At that point, entities doing business with the federal government use the UEI created in SAM.gov, and you should already be an active registrant in SAM, and GSA assigned your UEI, and that will be viewable within SAM.gov. And the SAM.gov record also includes the TIN and EIN numbers, and these are referenced here on the slide, but IMLS also assigns the Federal Award Identification Number, FAIN, which you can find in eGMS. And ACO is the authorized certifying official for the grant award. In most cases, this will be the state librarian, but it could also be the administrator that the state librarian reports to. And with that, I will turn it over to Madison.
Thank you so much, Laura. Once IMLS has received a message from the state library that a new LSTA coordinator has started, IMLS will send a welcome message letting that person know who their program officer is and where to find program information. Your program officer will also send a message regarding who your mentor will be. We have a mentor program. The mentors are drawn from a voluntary group of experienced coordinators. So you will have 2 experienced people to draw from when you have questions about the program. Your IMLS program officer is the person to contact for the official interpretation of the program legislative requirements. And once we have your name and contact information, we will add you to our state program report, that SPR, and the eGMS system. At this point, if you don't know who your program officer is, let one of us know, and that's either me, Cindy, or Dennis, and we will be sure to point you to the right person. Now, there are several ways of communicating with us at IMLS, and the avenue in which you do varies depending on whether we'd like it represented in one of our systems of record, like eGMS. Here are the reasons to use email, which are generally more informal questions. Though the quarterly grant accrual reports are also submitted by email, and that is a requirement to the program. And those need to be sent to that LSTA QRT accrual email address that we have here up on the screen. And we'll cover quarterly grant accruals a bit more in a later slide. Next slide, please. Now, as noted earlier, eGMS Reach is used by IMLS awardees to manage your awards. If you're a chief officer, an authorized certifying official, LSTA coordinator, a representative of library development, a finance officer, or an additional contact associated with that current IMLS award, you will have access to this system to help you administer that grant. Through eGMS Reach, you will be able to request payments and send official grant communications to your IMLS contact. You will have access to reporting schedules and previous payment requests listed, and you will be able to also send official messages directly to the program officer responding or responsible for administrating your award. Now, Reach is the email system, messaging system within eGMS, and that is for official records. You will use Reach to communicate with IMLS at that record level correspondence. So for example, equipment requests that need prior approval, those need to be submitted as a message in Reach. A submission of annual certifications and assurances related to your grant award, and that's annually, and SPR reporting extension requests. When in doubt of where to submit what, you can ask your program officer. But now I'll turn it back over to Dennis.
Thank you, Madison. We have a great deal of Grants to States information available to you on the IMLS website, particularly in the Grants to States manual. So the link to the Grants to States manual is at the top of this slide. And I believe there's also a link in the handout to the manual as well. And while we have a lot of information on other parts of the IMLS website as well, this is kind of our all-encompassing how-to area. And we do make sure that it's frequently updated, and we are making sure that we are reviewing it on a regular basis to make sure that it's accurate. And so we really do emphasize that it's a key resource. To get here, if you're not going right to the link from the IMLS website, you can click on grants, and then there's a grant programs area. And then under grant programs, there's a Grants to States special link. And then from there, there's also a Grants to States manual link that you can navigate to. In addition to the sections that you see here on the screen, which are these green headers, All of those green headers are actually expandable. So if you click on them under each category, there are links to relevant resources under those categories. But in addition to what you can see here on the screen, there are areas that show the state allotment tables for a national or a year by year comparison. And there's also an award cycle calendar, which we'll go into later. Financial requirements, there's resources about financial and performance reporting, which is where you would find a lot of SPR related help. Site visits, IMLS guidance, statutes, regulations, presentations and conferences, forms, and contacts. So it's a pretty exhaustive list, and we really do work hard to make sure that we have as much information publicly available to you as possible. And as I referred to under the financial and performance reporting section, there is a lot of key resources about the reporting system that's specific to us at Grants to States, which we affectionately refer to as the State Programs Report, or the SPR. On this slide here are links to 3 particularly helpful resources. The SPR overview and guide slide deck has been another recently updated consolidated resource that brought together a lot of former presentations that we put together about the SPR, and we rolled them all into one resource. It even has, used to be a PowerPoint, but it allows you to interact with it like a table of contents. So it's very navigable to get to exactly certain areas that you might be looking for. And then the state program reporting requirements document defines all the fields that you'll be filling out in the SPR system if you're ever wondering why or what's expected to be in there. And then the SPR reporting system user documentation file, that resource guides you through the SPR system, specifically with like step-by-step screenshots and even a glossary of terms if you wanted to know what certain terms in the SPR meant. And this is a screenshot to the SPR system itself. So you see the URL at the top. That will be very helpful to you. And I do believe that that URL is also in the handout for you to refer to. Obviously, we recommend bookmarking it. It's kind of a very near and dear website that you'll be using for reporting. And so in order to get you set up into the system, if you aren't already, you would reach out to your program officer. They will set you up with an account. Your username will be your email address. And then we send you a password, which you'll be able to change once you log in. We highly recommend using Chrome and Firefox. They're the most we've known to be the most reliable browsers for using the system. And we just want to kind of make a note here also that we've found that there are issues with saving and editing when you have 2 browser windows or tabs of the state program report open at the same time. So we just want to kind of caution you against that. If you found that you lost some data, it may have been because it was open in more than one place. The SPR is also our definitive area for updating contacts. And this makes Grants to States unique from other parts of IMLS. IMLS will use eGMS. Other offices of IMLS will use eGMS for contact updates and things like that. But because we have this entirely separate system, we use the SPR for maintaining contacts. And this is important for a number of reasons. You need updated contact information in order to certify your annual report every year. And we also use the contacts listed in the state info area to provide relevant individuals access to eGMS. And it's also the basis for our communications list. So if you want to make sure that you're getting relevant and appropriate emails from us, this is where you want to make sure that the right people are listed. But please also note that only you can update this page for key contacts and agency information, including the UEI and the EIN. These elements aren't required. They don't have an asterisk next to it to save the data, but they are required in order for you to certify the report. And please also note that the parent organization should match the name associated with your UEI number. We also have a section for 3 fiscal officers that you can list in the state info section. As you can see, the primary fiscal officer should be listed first. And then if you have other fiscal staff that you would like to have access to eGMS, you can list them here as fiscal officer 1 or 2. If you need even more fiscal staff that might need access to eGMS for drawdowns or things like that, then feel free to email your program officer with the contact information, and we can make sure that that's arranged. And here is just to break down the ways that people can access the SPR and the different permission levels of the SPR. There's 4 user roles in the SPR system. And so the LSTA coordinator and the authorized certifying official accounts, they have permission to manage sub-recipient user accounts in the system. They also may establish user accounts, and they can update lost or forgotten passwords for sub-recipients. That is, if you as a state library want to decide to have your sub-recipients report directly into the SPR. There's a relatively newer user role that we've added, and that's SLAA project data entry. And this user allows someone to view and edit all of the projects that you have listed in your SPR, but they can't access your administrative project or any of your financial reports. So we're thinking that the project data entry role might be useful for additional state library consultants. And it's also been used for third-party evaluators as needed. And now I believe I am going to hand it over to Laura.
Thank you, Dennis. So here we have a timeline, and the light colored bar is the period of performance, and the block after is the time you have to submit your report. As a reminder, the CARES Act award ran parallel with your FY 2020 award and ended on September 30th, 2021. And the ARPA award is also running parallel with your FY 2021 award and won't end until September 30th, 2022. So this is kind of a handy little chart to help you visualize all the different awards happening here. Next slide, please. The grant cycle calendars for each year are also available online in our Grants to States manual. But as our former colleague and friend Michelle Farrell used to say, you might want to print this out because it provides the due dates for materials you need to send to IMLS. So it's a really handy thing to have kind of at your fingertips to help you visualize all the different due dates and reporting. Next slide, please. Every 3 months, IMLS needs you to report on grant accrual amounts for the Grants to States program. And so we developed this worksheet because there isn't an official federal form for the quarterly grant accrual reports. Each quarter's accrual must represent the total expenses for active grant awards that a grantee has incurred during the grant period, but has not yet submitted to IMLS for reimbursement. Because 2 federal fiscal years typically overlap in their grant periods, quarterly accrual information will cover these 2 separate active grants. You should send the grant number or numbers and total grant accrual amounts for the current award years in the body of the email to lstaqrtaaccrual@imls.gov. And remember to submit this information no later than 4 business days after the last day of the quarter, which is also noted in the grant cycle calendar. Next slide. The LSTAC listserv was designed by and for LSTA coordinators to share information on practical aspects of administering LSTA grants. It's maintained by the Oregon State Library. Coordinators can ask questions about reports, subawards, allowable costs, all sorts of topics here. Larger questions of availability of federal funds or policies should be directed to your program officer, however. And IMLS is not responsible for the content of this list. And now I'll turn it back to Dennis for some check-in questions.
Thank you, Laura. Yes, we thought that we would creatively have you review what we've learned with a little bit of an informal quiz. So our first check-in question is, oh, and feel free to answer using the chat as we kind of mull over the possible answer. So the first question is, you use eGMS Reach to A, manage awards, B, request payments, C, send official grant communications such as prior approval requests for equipment, D, access reporting schedules and previous payment requests, or E, all of the above. Not everyone at once. Seeing a positive, correct answers in the chat. So yes, most of you have guessed it correctly. In 2019, we began using Reach, which is a web-based awards management system for grant-related communications and streamlining record keeping. The next check-in question. You should update your state's personnel information and submit annual reports through eGMS. True or false? Nice. This was a little bit trickier. I like the tension, not knowing exactly what the answer is. So drum roll, please. The answer is false. This is a little bit trickier, but you submit all personnel changes through the SPR state info option, which is under account management in the SPR, and annual reports will also be submitted through the SPR. If you are familiar with IMLS and maybe you're overseeing a discretionary grant in addition to grants to states, I can see why this would be a bit of an existential crisis for you, because on that side of things, they certainly use eGMS in a different way than we do. I believe it's now time for Madison to ask questions.
Yes, thank you. Now we're on to a little bit of different flavor. The more you know, here are a few other things to keep in mind. While we didn't explicitly cover them in the orientation, we'll run through these questions and answers to give you more of a flavor of the program. So true or false, IMLS should be credited on any grant-related product, such as websites, brochures, and posters. Is this true or false? I'm seeing some great answers in the chat. And you all are correct. It is true. Hold on, I'm getting lost. True. Acknowledging IMLS is required of the state library administrative agencies and their subgrantees for any project that uses IMLS funds. Remember to refer to that grantee communications kit and share it with your grantees. This acknowledgement also helps us keep track of your great work in the field, so we see it publicly as well. It is a topic we'll be covering a little bit more of on day 2 of the conference. All right, next question. The SPR is only open between October through December to enter project information. Is this true or false? Seeing some answers, I'm seeing some answers, all saying false. And you're correct, it's false. The SPR is now open all year, except for occasional downtime for system updates, and those are usually Wednesday evenings. Also, this year's final reports deadline will move from December to January based on recent changes to the regulations. All right, next question. Now, only substantive changes to your 5-year plan, like a change in goals, need to be approved by IMLS. Is this true or false? Do I sense hesitation? I see mostly trues, a few falses peppered in. And it is true. Small changes like deciding not to run a particular project do not need IMLS approval. The proposed revision must be submitted to IMLS for review as an amendment to your plan, and that's only a change in goals. Proposed revisions are due no later than April 1st for it to be effective the following fiscal year starting October 1st. Now I'll send it back over to Laura.
Great. All right. Our next question. What percent of your award can be utilized for SLAA administrative costs? 2%, 4%, 0, or all of these choices? Let's see. Responses here. All right. And for those of you who said the answer is D, all of these choices, you are correct. You are not required to spend any of your funds on administration, but if you do, you can spend up to 4%. Continuing, the more you know, promotional material that states libraries are good places and deserves to exist is an allowable cost. Is this true or false? Pretty consistent here. Is indeed false. Public relations costs such as brochures, bookmarks, charged to an LSTA project to carry out that specific project would be allowable, but always remember to consult with your program officer for further guidance on allowable costs. All right, if a cost is not allowable with LSTA funds, we can still pay for the cost using our own funds and count it as a match. True or false? Mix here. Right, yes, and for those of you who said false, you are right. Allowable cost principles do apply to both federal and match funds. And next, we'll keep the questions going here, but these few are what we like to think of as some of our top misconceptions, so we'll call them Mythbusters. And our first myth, site visits are an opportunity to find the skeletons in your SPR closet, and they take place annually. True or false? Good. This is false. Site visits are intended to provide on-site guidance and an opportunity to take a deeper dive into the unique structure of your state library. And program officers typically visit each SLAA once during a 5-year cycle. Next question. For Mythbuster 2, anyone out in the field doing IMLS things should directly contact IMLS if they have questions instead of the SLAA. True or false? Very good. False. The SLAA is the primary point of contact with any subrecipients. Great. Mythbuster 3, all requirements related to IMLS surveys and funding come from IMLS. Great. This is false. There's a lot of variation from state to state in terms of administering the program, as well as misconceptions about IMLS requirements that are actually state requirements. For example, eligibility, surveys tied to state aid, librarian certification requirements. All right, and this is our final myth buster here. If you're having issues related to the IMLS program that might cause bigger headaches later on, you should wait to tell IMLS about them until they become real problems. Very good. Definitely a false. The program is a federal state partnership, and we want to help you resolve things before they create larger problems for the program. So please contact us early and often. Now we are happy to take any questions. You have one here. Can you please go over the accrual report slide one more time? Sure.
And in the grants to states manual, we do have a space in there about the quarterly accruals, and there's a sort of a template that looks pretty much exactly like what you see here on the screen that you can use.
Are digital signatures acceptable? For example, can we submit digital signatures on documents such as the 5-year plan assurances?
That's a yes. That's a yes. Those forms should accommodate digital signatures now. But you can also print them and ink sign them and scan them if that's your preference. Well, it seems like we might have come to a lull in the questions, so we don't need to keep the call going, knowing that you can reach out to any one of us at any time to answer any of your questions. And then hopefully we'll see some of you in person or virtually next week, where we'll present a lot more content, which may inspire a lot more questions. So we really appreciate all your work for this program. We understand and acknowledge how hard you work, especially in this time of pandemic, long tail, and all the stimulus funds that have come your way. So keep up the good work, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.